Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. We're always laughing when we start. As soon as we come on live, we're always laughing. And it's always because we're talking and all of a sudden, boop, oh, we're live. Okay, here we go. Good morning.
Good morning.
It's Monday.
April 27th.
Did you have a good weekend? We hope that you did. It is April 27th. This is Morning Devotion with Steve and Michelle. I'm Steve.
I'm Michelle.
That's right. And we're glad you've joined us this morning. How can they join us, Michelle?
They can join us on Facebook. They can join us on YouTube at Chocolate Bayou Worship Center. If you're on YouTube, please subscribe, hit the like button and the notification bell so you'll be notified when a video goes up. And you can also join us on our webpage at talkbay.org.
Amen. And what do I have over here? What do I have right here?
A tablet.
Now you know what I'm getting at.
So if you are joining us and following along, please comment. We want your interaction. So comment as we go along through the devotion and give us your thoughts, please.
Amen. We really do enjoy the interactive part of this devotion. So this is Morning Devotions. And so what we do every morning is 9 a.m. We come to you live from the CBWC studios live. And we want to spend some time just visiting with you and having this time of devotion. It has been a real blessing to be able to do this during this pandemic as we've been able to stay engaged with a lot of the church. Yeah, during this time, as we've been doing this like for over a month, or no, we're like right at a month, because we started a couple of days at the end of March. So we're right about hitting the month mark. We finished 4 complete weeks last week. And so this is our 5th week. And so it's been good that we've been engaging or being able to stay engaged with many people from our church and others. And so that's been great. We want you to continue to be engaged with us. So if you're joining us online via Facebook, YouTube, and whatnot, as Michelle said, please join us in the interactive part of this. If you comment, it's going to go into our chat window, whether you're on YouTube or on Facebook. If you are just following on Michelle's Facebook page, it'll pop up over there only, but she monitors that, and we like to have you included in our devotion this morning. So at least someone give us a hey, thumbs up or something to let us know that we are live streaming and the sound is, and you can hear us. And to that point, we normally switch to our producers at this time, and I switch to me. I'm the producer this morning. And so we're glad that you have joined us. Our producers are volunteers, and as such, they have lives to live. And so we don't always have a producer in the studio with us, but we always want one.
Yes. So please volunteer.
There you go. Please volunteer.
If you want to go.
Yes. We're, like I said, we're very grateful for the volunteers that we have, but we do need more so that we can, and it's pretty simple. And I say that, and my producers might be like, yeah, okay. It kind of is, and every day the difficult part for them is I've been making changes along the way, but we are getting, the point is to simplify it even more and more and more so that anybody can come in and with 5 minutes of training produce a show, and we're getting there. We're getting there. Okay, so that being said, we want to at this time acknowledge our sponsor, and our sponsor today is Anonymous, and we've become real good friends with Anonymous. As we've had several who are sponsoring anonymously, and we're so grateful for that. We're grateful for those who sponsor anonymously, but we also want people to feel free to sponsor and sponsor as your business. That can really help. We do need the sponsorship, and so we want to open it up to businesses and to families, and just maybe to do it as a way to celebrate one another. I think it's really neat if you have a friend who's having a birthday and say, hey, I'm sponsoring the show in your name. You can send us a picture of them, or you say, hey, I'm sponsoring. We have several people say, I'm sponsor, and I want to encourage other people's sponsorship by letting them know I'm sponsoring. It's not anything wrong with that at all. I like when the family sponsor. We've had a few family sponsor, and we get to throw the picture of that beautiful family up there, and even sponsor in the name of their little toddler kid. I'm waiting for someone to say, I want to sponsor, and my dog's going to sponsor.
Oh, yeah. That'd be cute.
That would be cute. I'm going to sponsor, and Ralph is going to sponsor. Does anybody still name their dogs Ralph? Hey, it's like
That's a cute name.
we do small talk as people are joining us online. Shay says good morning. Good morning, Shay.
Good morning.
God bless you. We're glad that you have joined us online. And speaking of animal names, I'll just never forget Peyton's cat's name. Remember one of our granddaughters, Peyton. Remember what she named her cat?
Batman.
That's a cool name, but I'm talking about the other one. When she was a lot younger, she named her cat Oliver Kevin.
Oh.
Oliver
Yeah,
Kevin.
Oliver.
I don't know. That's a great name for a cat. Oliver Kevin. Okay, praise the Lord. So thank you for our sponsor. If you want to sponsor the program, we're about to get into the devotion. If you want to sponsor this program, we appreciate it. None of us get paid. We're all volunteers, but it does go to the church, and especially during this time, the church is definitely needing funds. So you can sponsor the program for $25. Just go over to chalkbay.org. That's CHOCBAY.org, and that's short for Chocolate Bayou. And that's where we are located outside of Alvin. Good morning, Richard Epler. Richard is here. Amen. Thank you for joining us, Richard. I'm going to get Richard to come in and guest spot with me one day. Yeah. If not on this show, one of our other shows, or just a special that we're going to do. Praise the Lord for that. All right. It is April the 27th. We are getting close to closing out this month. And I'm going to be announcing tomorrow the devotion that we're going to be kicking off Friday, as Friday is the 1st. That is correct. It is April 27th. Let us pray. Father, thank you for this day. And as we get into this devotion, it's our desire to please you and to be a blessing, Father, to others. I pray that you would enlighten us today, instruct us in your word, and then having heard from you, our Father, as good children, we will be obedient in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
April 27th.
Come to me with empty hands and an open heart, ready to receive abundant blessings. I know the depth and breadth of your neediness. Your life path has been difficult, draining you of strength. Come to me for nurture. Let me fill you up with my presence. I in you and you in me. My power flows most freely into weak ones, aware of their need for me. Faltering steps of dependence are not lack of faith. They are links to my presence.
Amen. There's some good stuff in there. We definitely want to break some of that down. Come to me with empty hands. I love that. I'm going to tell a quick story, and I hadn't planned on it, and I'm going to butcher this a little bit. As I think this was a passage from The Cross and the Switchblade. Some of you may be familiar with that. It was a story, a true account story of David Wilkerson, and David Wilkerson was called by the Lord to just go to New York City and do a great work that ended up being a great work there. He was kind of just being led of the Lord, didn't know what all it was going to turn into. Encountered the gangs of New York in the 60s, I believe it was early 60s, and so some great fruit came from that work, and people got saved up to and including, as they say, the OG Nicky Cruz, the original gangster. He was a rough dude, and the Lord turned him around. He got saved and gave his life to the Lord, and he's still ministering today. Nicky Cruz is. David Wilkerson passed away. But a great work. Some of you may have heard of Teen Challenge. That is all a product of that work that started so many years ago. But David Wilkerson, and I believe it was a passage in Cross and the Switchblade, where he was talking about, I guess it was his grandfather, maybe his father and grandfather were pastors. I don't know. I feel like maybe it was his grandfather, and they were in position leaderships in the church. And back in that day, they were very legalistic, and there's still a lot of legalism today. But let's just tell it like it is. Back in the early days in America and this country, even in 40 years ago, people would come into church and they were literally ruled by the people in the church. And David Wilkerson tells a story of if somebody wore a hat in church, they'd come over and yank that hat off their head. The ushers or the elders would, or deacons, and it was just very, very harsh. Which back in that day, you didn't wear a hat inside of a church, inside of a building. Period. I still don't like to wear a ball cap in church, and some people do, but that's just kind of my old traditional part, not so much legalist. And so one of the things they said, though, was that David Wilkerson's grandfather says, sometimes they were being too legalistic, but yeah, when you do come to the Lord does want to take things out of your life. Mm-hmm. But the problem is, a lot of people come into the church, and church leadership historically has said, we're taking this out of your life and taking that out of your life and taking this out of your life. And a lot of people just feel emptied, robbed, and like, well, I have no life. They've taken everything out of my life. And David Wilkerson put it this way, or by his grandfather, he said, and it may be rough in this illustration, but it's, even a dog, if you come and take a bone away from him, he's going to be mad. But if you throw a steak down in its place, he'll forget all about the bone. But he needed to empty up that spot. And so our devotion says, come to me with empty hands and an open heart. We do need to empty our lives. We need to empty our lives of not just things that we used to do that we should not do anymore, but just empty our lives in general so that God can fill it. And I guarantee you, I promise you, with all that is in me, and I can't guarantee much in this world, but I can guarantee from God that if you want him, if you love him, what he takes out to empty and put in its place is so much better. It is like going from a bone to a steak. It really is. And we need to embrace that and be willing to go to him with open arms and open hands. Come to me with empty hands and an open heart, ready to receive abundant blessings. And he does have blessings abundant.
Mm-hmm. So, the more you empty, he'll refill with blessings and what you need.
Yeah.
Maybe what he wants you to be doing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think maybe some people open up a little bit for the Lord, and we like to say God wants it all or nothing, and there's a lot of truth to that. But as we are growing and maturing, a lot of things in our early maturing development, at least, I believe that God says, I'm going to take what you give me so that I can tease you a little bit and show you that I'm good. Taste me and see that I'm good. Show you a little bit so you're like, oh my goodness, God is good. I want to empty up more of him.
But I also think too, we want to pick and choose what we give God. And we don't get the full, complete blessings and all that he wants, because there's just certain things that we don't want to give up or give to God or stop doing.
What is it, Michelle? What confession are you making that you're not giving up?
I'm not telling you.
I'm just kidding. I know you probably
That's between me and God.
Is it? Yeah, she sometimes even pulls that on me. But she does have a relationship that's more important than a relationship with me and more critical, eternal life sustaining, and that's the relationship with the Lord. So they can have secrets if they want to. But what do they say? Secrets make something? Whatever.
Secrets don't have to make friends. Or something
secrets
like
don't make
secrets
friends.
Don't make friends.
But you can have secrets with God as long as you are open with him.
Yes.
So, when we open up ourselves to receive blessings from the Lord, let's open up ourselves to receive the blessings he wants to give us, and not the ones we are seeking necessarily.
Right. Yeah.
That's a lot. People do that a lot. And by that, I'm saying people oftentimes are under the impression from bad theology that God's here to fill your pockets. God's here to guarantee you a lot of things that don't even last. God's here to bring eternal blessings into your life. Things you're going to carry with you into the next life. Those are the ones that really, really matter. As the old joke goes, the rich man stored up all his money and decided, I'm going to be buried with all of my gold. I'm going to be buried with all of my gold. I'm taking it to heaven with me. Of course, we know it's a ridiculous story, but we're going to follow it anyway. And so he gets up to heaven, he gets up to the pearly gates, as the old joke goes, and there's St. Peter there with his wings and his little key, as they always say in a cartoon. And he comes up and he's dragging all of this gold. And he says, "Here I am at heaven's gates with my gold." And Peter turns to the guy and says, "Another guy here with a bunch of asphalt." Of course, the old saying about in the scripture that uses that, I think we take it too literally sometimes, but the streets are paved with gold. Just if the streets are paved with gold, what does that mean? That the greatest value we have on earth is what we put under our feet in heaven. What I mean, the comparison of how glorious and how beautiful and how awesome God is. So why store up asphalt and pavement in this life so much? Let the Lord fill your life with his blessings that are eternal. I know the depth and breadth of your neediness. Your life path has been difficult, draining you of strength. Come to me for nurture. See, that nurture is not physical nurture. It's spiritual nurture. I often talk about people's spiritual health. I believe that we talk about physical health all the time, and Michelle works hard to try to feed us healthy, and she's very good at it. And you can see she's better at it than I am. But you can tell by me wearing a long black shirt how much weight I have not lost, but black is stomach. And I think I probably lost some.
Weight.
Huh? She thinks I've lost weight because I've been just eating what she puts in front of me, and she's been, I guess you say I'm not getting carbohydrate. I don't know. I just eat what are you doing?
It's low carb. It's getting low carb. You're not, it's whole, if you eat carbs, it's whole grain bread. Not white
Okay,
bread that turns into
whole
sugar.
grain bread. It ain't as good, but
It tastes good.
okay. But that's the thing. I'm not worried about. I'm not trying to focus on taste as much anymore. If we had started this earlier, I probably would have lost more weight during this pandemic because we don't eat out as much because we're not out running around as much, and that's why a lot of us eat out because we're out running around. And so I've just been eating what she's been putting in front of me, and she's been giving me healthier food, and it's making a difference. Are you going to tie this into spiritual? Absolutely. It's making a difference in me. So much to the point that whenever we do have our cheat day, I feel after I eat all that bad food.
Mm-hmm.
That's good, huh? My body is like, what are you doing to me?
This is nasty. Ooh.
Yeah, it is nasty. Good morning, Denise Osborne, with the nice sunshine emoji. And so, yeah, eating healthier makes it to where actually when something unhealthy comes in, you're like, oh, this don't belong.
Mm-hmm.
Being spiritually nourished, and you start focusing on your spiritual health, then the things that you used to do that you were just used to, you didn't even notice, and they were bad for you, but it's like, I've got kind of accustomed to them. Whenever you do start focusing on your spiritual health and you are walking spiritually healthy, you might even sit down in a show that didn't bother you before. It's like, oh my gosh, this show is just so wrong. Whether it's nothing, nasty, filthy, whatever. It's just like, I don't want to even bring that into me. And God wants to spiritually nourish us, and we may be spiritually weak today. Maybe we've just been spiritually weak, and we need to come to the Lord today and say, I'm ready for a makeover. I'm ready for you to get to work on me and spiritually nourish me. My power flows freely into weak ones, aware of their need for me. Faltering steps of dependence are not lack of faith. They are linked. Faltering steps of dependence are not a lack of faith. They are linked to my presence. So depending on Him is not a sign of weakness. It's really kind of a sign of strength that I am going to obey the Lord. And I know the time is running short today. One or two things that we are trying to shorten our show a little bit, as you'll find in a moment, we're going to be closing out the show, and there's going to be some content continue to be streamed today. And some of the content is what's going to be over on Alvin TV, which is streaming also. We're going to leave it streaming some here today. We are going to shorten our show a little bit today. We definitely got to shorten it because Michelle has an appointment. that she needs to go to. And so we're grateful that she has joined us. Let's just be mindful this morning that we need to open up our lives, open up our arms, and go to the Lord and allow Him to spiritually nurture us. And we're so grateful that He is willing to do that. We thank you that you've joined us online. We thank you for our anonymous sponsor. And it's our prayers today that you would have an open heart to receive from the Lord. Let Him spiritually nurture you today. In Jesus' name. Father, we thank you for this day. And Lord, as we are mindful of all that you're bringing into our lives, let us be submissive to receive it today. It's our heart's desire to touch your heart. It's our spirit's desire to spiritually connect with you today. Let us not be absent from you. Let us connect with you. Let us be nurtured and filled by you today. In Jesus' name, amen.
Joe, the king of the workers of the world.
Hi, folks.
Joe's the king because he can buy more with his wages than any other worker on the globe. Now, what makes it possible for Joe to earn such a good living? He's no smarter than workers in other countries.
Are you kidding?
He's no stronger than workers in other lands.
Oh, yeah? Well, just watch me.
Just because Joe's an American doesn't mean...
Yeah? Well, being an American is the best thing in the... Oh! My back!
Sure, being an American is great, but how could you be superior to any foreigner when you or your folks might be any one of a dozen different races or religions? So, if you're no Superman, it must be the American way of doing things that makes you the luckiest guy in the world.
I don't think I'm so lucky.
You don't? Well, let me show you.
Hey, what's that gadget? Television?
No, it's a time machine. Just pull that lever. You'll see how people worked 100 years ago.
Hey, this I like.
Oh, that's too far back. Try again. We want to stop at 1850.
Who's the character?
That's your grandfather, Joe.
Oh.
He had to work 69 hours a week to earn a living because he had only inexpensive hand tools and his own strength to help him make things. Your grandfather was a powerful man, yet his strength equaled only 1/10 of a horsepower. You have hundreds of horsepower in this costly giant of a machine to multiply your strength and efficiency 1,000 times. This makes it possible for you to earn more than any worker in history. And still have leisure time each day to enjoy life.
So I'm lucky. But what about the rich guy who does nothing while I do the work?
True, there are rich people who contribute nothing. And there are poor people who contribute the same. But most of the invested capital that buys the tools you use comes from your fellow Americans. 40 million of us have money in the banks. 70 million of us own insurance policies. Over 15 million of us invest savings in corporation stocks and bonds, which help to finance industry. Each year, the people of America invest billions of dollars to create new plants and equipment. This invested capital buys the tools which make a man's labor worth more because he produces more. In China, for example, where there is practically no capital available for investment in plants or tools, a man's labor is not worth very much. A coolie takes 10 days to move 10 gallons of kerosene 100 miles at a freight cost of 10 cents a gallon. An American railroad worker takes only 2 hours to move 100,000 gallons of kerosene 100 miles at a freight cost of 1 cent a gallon. The coolie makes 10 cents a day. An average American railroad worker makes $10 a day, or 100 times more than the coolie. The average railroad worker has the benefit of a $20,000 investment in equipment. The Chinese coolie's equipment is worth only 10 cents. With constant improvement in expensive tools and the skill to use them, the value of any man's labor can be multiplied many times. Naturally, the people in this country who invest their savings with industry expect dividends. No dividends, no investments. Without new capital each year to finance new plants, tools, and equipment, labor and management would soon find themselves in pretty bad shape.
Yeah, without capital to buy new tools, I might not do so good. But look what a new invention did to my grandpa. For 25 years, he knocks his brains out in the wagon works. Then along comes the gas button. Need I tell you what happened to Grandpop?
The history of our country proves that new inventions create thousands of jobs for everyone they displace. So it wasn't long before your grandfather had a better job at more pay for less work. Our industrial progress is largely the result of the competitive struggle between companies to capture the market to increase profits. Huge sums are spent each year to make a better product to sell for less. Yet, regardless of how much money is spent to develop a new idea, there is often failure. When research proves successful, everyone shares in the accomplishment. The business which fails to give the consumer as much value as a competitor gives often goes bankrupt. However, on a national scale, competition gives the greatest good to the greatest number by continually producing more and better goods at lower prices. The American way of doing things makes it possible for more people to own their own homes. We're only 7% of the world's population, but we have 50% of the radios. We have 54% of the world's telephones. Americans own practically all the refrigerators in existence to give them plenty of ice quickly and easily. Bathtubs, we've got 92% of them. Most of us have the leisure time to enjoy the peace and quiet of the beautiful countryside. As we drive about in 72% of the world's automobiles.
I told you to turn at the last corner. You don't eat it. You eat it. I know. I want a candy bar.
Under the protection of our freedoms, American labor, management, and capital, the greatest production team in the history of mankind, have made the United States the industrial master of the world. Capital must continue to provide industry with the funds to create new tools and plants. Labor and management must continue to increase the production of better goods at lower prices so that more people will be able to buy the things that make life easier and happier for all of us. Then Joe will continue to be the king of the workers of the world.
You said it, brother.
You've probably heard the word engineering before, and you've probably been told it's pretty important. But what exactly is engineering, and who exactly is an engineer? Engineers are people who design and build things that we use every day. However, they don't just go building the first thing that comes to mind. They work hard to make something we need, and they want to do a good job of it. So how do engineers decide what they need to build? Well, in most cases, they start with a question. Here's an example. Say you live on a space station, and something outside breaks. Obviously, you need to go outside and fix it, but how exactly do you do that? That's a great question for engineers. Once they've got a good handle on things, they'll start imagining ways to solve the problem. They'll come up with all kinds of ideas, and some that might even seem a little crazy. That's important because sometimes the craziest idea is the one that works best. After coming up with these ideas, they'll pick a few that make the most sense. Next, they'll start drawing a plan. Depending on the idea, the plan can be very simple or very complicated. But the important part is the plan itself. A good plan helps engineers focus on what they're making and, most importantly, why. Now the engineers get to have some real fun. They get to create something. It's important to stick to the plan, though, so the idea doesn't go too far off course. Once they've built it, then they have to test it. Experimentation is very important because it's here that engineers learn what works and, well, what doesn't. And while it's great when something goes right on the first try, it's actually good when things don't, because that gives engineers a chance to go back and improve on their original idea. And improve they will until they've solved the problem. So the next time you've got a problem to solve, whether simple or complicated, there's probably a team of engineers ready to create something to solve it. And nobody solves engineering problems quite like NASA.
We are often told, God loves you. But what does that really mean? That some impersonal force, galaxies away, may consider you from time to time, or that you are a single drop in a vast ocean of humanity and God cares for all of it. There are billions of lives, billions of stories. Can we really believe He has great destinies planned for all of them? Surely the ruler of the universe has more important affairs than to notice the needs of one singular individual. But hear this, nothing could be further from the truth. When God says, "I love you," it means that He crafted every detail of your being. Your every feature is His perfect design. His mind perceives your worries and your thoughts. His heart is broken by your pain. You are His child, created in His image. Your value exceeds all the riches of earth. Your worth extends beyond the stars. And though you may be unaware, He's carefully constructing the events of your life to build His kingdom. If you are willing, He can and will achieve wonders through your hands. It is the deepest passion, the most meaningful promise. It is your security, your hope, and your future. It is the truth beyond doubt. God loves you.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
It is the first human footstep on the moon, and the world is forever changed.
Fantastic feeling. It was one of great accomplishment.
It was almost miraculous.
We did it for all the right reasons. We did come in peace for all mankind.
On July 20th, 1969, as the lunar dust compresses beneath the boot of astronaut Neil Armstrong, NASA's Apollo project scores a bullseye. Until the fall of 1957, the moon is Earth's only satellite, orbiting for eons in silent vigil. That October, the hush of space and America's sense of security is shattered by Sputnik. The sound of the Soviet satellite becomes eerily familiar to Americans. Fears escalate that the Cold War could heat up with catastrophic effect.
Immediately, everyone thought, well, they're now able to really send their military machines around the world up above. Who is not going to be in danger?
President Eisenhower combined several agencies working on rocketry and flight to create one civilian agency, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Over the next years, the United States successfully launches satellites with great scientific payback. To prepare for human flight, several animals, including a chimpanzee named Ham, survived the ride to space and back. But once again, these American accomplishments are eclipsed by the Soviet space machine. April 12, 1961, cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin becomes the first human in space. To temper this latest Soviet triumph, the U.S. needs to put its own man in space. That man is astronaut Alan Shepard.
1.2 G.
Shepard's flight had tremendous impact. I think it was the leading technological accomplishment of that era, and led to the whole future of the exploration to the moon.
Unlike Gagarin's 108-minute orbit of Earth, Shepard's suborbital flight, the nation's lone human venture into space, lasts just 15 minutes. Nonetheless, President Kennedy goes before Congress and lays down the gauntlet.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
The combination of the Gagarin flight and the Bay of Pigs disaster with Cuba, I think, pushed Kennedy towards something that would be positive and would show that we were ahead of the Soviet Union.
President Kennedy's interest in space moves beyond just beating the Soviets. As his passion grows, so does his rhetoric.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
It will take an all-out effort by thousands of dedicated Americans to design and build the machines and methodologies needed to succeed, one small step at a time.
Godspeed, John Glenn.
February 20th, 1962. John Glenn circumnavigates the Earth 3 times.
The single most important factor was that man could survive and perform as well at 0 gravity as he could at 1G.
0G, and I feel fine.
By May 1963, the U.S. Mercury program flies 6 manned flights. But the last, Gordon Cooper's 34-hour solo mission, still leaves the moon out of America's reach. The Gemini program is the next step. Its larger capsule carries 2 astronauts. Mercury veteran Gus Grissom flies with John Young aboard Gemini 3, the program's first manned flight. On Gemini 4, Ed White opens the hatch and steps out into the void as America's first spacewalker.
I feel like $1 million. I'm gonna pick up.
Extravehicular activity, EVA, in NASA speak, is critical to a moon mission.
Go. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Engine start.
So too is the ability of 2 spacecraft to meet up or rendezvous in space. It happens on Jim Lovell's first flight.
The first rendezvous, Gemini 6 with Gemini 7, I think was a magnificent milestone in the quest to go to the moon, because we had to determine the types of rendezvous that we want to do around the moon, and we first had it just about around the Earth.
By Gemini's 12th and final mission, rendezvous and docking are well practiced.
Gemini 12, Houston, Capcom, 1 minute to LOS. New EVA record, beautiful job.
NASA is now ready to shoot for the moon. But there are just 3 years left to meet President Kennedy's goal, and no one really knows how close the highly secretive Soviets are. And of the moon itself, little is known.
Could be dust up to 25, 30 feet thick. If you landed on it, you would sink into the moon. If you landed on it and set out some fire from the rockets, exhaust, it would cause this huge inferno on the lunar surface. What were the radiation problems on the moon from the sun? What were the thermal conditions you had to deal with on the lunar surface?
Getting answers falls to a series of robotic spacecraft. In mid-1966, Surveyor 1 lands on the lunar surface. The 11,000 photos it sends back help to dispel fear and clear the way for the Apollo moon landing program. 2 short months after the final Gemini flight, astronauts Gus Grissom, Ed White and Roger Chaffee are posing for photos and spending hours in simulators as they prepare for the first Apollo mission less than a month away. January 27th, 1967. The crew is in the capsule, mounted atop an unfueled Saturn 1B for a dress rehearsal of the countdown sequence.
Now we gotta get the moon. We can't talk between 2 or 3 buildings.
A series of problems has already raised tensions at the launch pad. When 5.5 hours into the test, Ed White's shouts are heard.
At that point, things progressed with absolutely stunning speed. I mean, it was only a matter of 20 seconds before the crew was unconscious. Moments later, the pressure from the fire had increased to the point where it literally ruptured the hull of the spacecraft. Toxic smoke spewed into the White Room. The technicians were struggling to get the hatch open and rescue the crew, but they were driven back by the intense heat and the smoke. Many long minutes passed before they could open the hatch, and of course by that point the crew had died. All 3 astronauts were dead.
The loss of Grissom, White, and Chaffee momentarily cripples NASA's moon landing program. But as the 3 astronauts are given heroes' burials, Apollo, like another mythological figure, Phoenix, begins its rise from the ashes. Following recommendations of an accident review board, the Apollo Command Module is redesigned and rewired for safety, all under the wary eye of the astronauts who will fly it. 20 months later, from the same pad Apollo 1 had occupied, Apollo 7 roars off for an 11-day shakedown in Earth orbit.
We inherited the first manned Apollo mission, which turned out to be Apollo 7. But as with many things with NASA, what was a disaster with Apollo 1 turned out to be a real triumph with Apollo 7 because the spacecraft itself was a marvelous flying machine.
It's also the first time live television shows Earthbound humans what it's like to be in space.
It's from that lovely Apollo something. You guys should write. Apollo room. High atop everything. High atop everything.
Apollo 7's success restores some swagger to America's space program. But there are reports the Soviets may be closing in on the moon.
The original plan was for Apollo 8 to be an Earth orbit test, but the lunar module wasn't ready. And so the decision was made to actually do a circumnavigation of the moon. So that's what actually happened in December of 1968.
The engines are on. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Commander Frank Borman, veteran astronaut Jim Lovell, and rookie Bill Anders are the first humans to ride the Saturn V's 7.5 million pounds of thrust.
We were way up on the top, like a ladybug on the end of your automobile's whip antenna. So as these big engines were thrashing around to keep this thing straight up, boy, the ladybug was getting thrashed. And it was so loud, we couldn't talk. The vibration, the thrashing was violent, and you couldn't see the instrument panel. But when we cleared the pad and had some aerodynamic stability and didn't have this noise, why things steadied out, and by that time my heart stopped racing.
Apollo 8 is the first time humans venture beyond Earth's gravity. Lovell marvels at never-seen-before sights.
I can see the entire Earth now out of the center window. I can see Florida, Cuba, Central America.
Christmas Eve Day, 1968. With the moon dwarfing the nearing spacecraft, Commander Borman fires the main engine on the Apollo service module. The craft slows, then slides into orbit around the moon. The world watches in awe but none more so than the three men peering out the tiny windows of their capsule.
We were the first three people to leave the confines of the Earth and be captured by another body. First time three people saw the far side of the moon. First time that we had gone so far, and the first time that we saw the Earth from 240,000 miles away. So in that respect, I kind of thought that Apollo 8 was really a milestone and a high point in my career.
The vast loneliness up here on the moon is awe-inspiring, and it makes you realize just what you have back there on Earth. The Earth from here is a grand oasis in the big vastness of space.
As the moon's pockmarked surface slips quietly by, the Apollo 8 crew ends its Christmas Eve broadcast with a special message for those back home.
And from the crew of Apollo 8, we close with good night, good luck, a Merry Christmas, and God bless all of you on the good Earth.
You are watching the Journeys to Apollo on Alvin TV. We hope you're enjoying it. This is a limited simulcast on some Facebook channels and some YouTube channels. I should be looking here. And if you want to, you will continue to have this through several hours this morning as we're going to continue to stream some of the content that you will only be able to get uninterrupted at Alvin TV. So if you go over on YouTube and search Alvin YouTube or Alvin TV on YouTube and just kind of scroll through till you find the little Alvin.tv logo with the Texas flag on it, and you can subscribe to that. And then you'll be able to watch daily, local, hopefully, content, at least classic content, and a lot of current content. And so we hope you enjoy that. So I hope you enjoy this, the Journeys of Apollo.
For all its success, Apollo 8 is missing one key component for a moon landing. The lunar module, still being built, is overweight and behind schedule.
It's not a simple thing. Spacecraft never landed on another celestial body, so the design had to be done from scratch. One of the main things you had to figure out was that you had to have a rocket on the ascent stage especially that you had to be 100% sure would work, because you didn't want the two astronauts sitting on the lunar surface and the rocket didn't work.
The first LEM is ready for testing in Earth orbit on Apollo 9. The LEM is put through its paces and proves it's ready to go to the moon. With one significant limitation. Still too heavy, the LEM can't land. So Apollo 10, like Apollo 8 before it, will only orbit the moon and test rendezvous the lander with the command module.
This is really a rugged planet.
As John Young watches from his command module, Charlie Brown, Commander Tom Stafford and LEM pilot Gene Cernan undock Snoopy, their lander that can't.
And I was doing backup maneuvers to the attitudes, and if they couldn't do the maneuvers, I would do the maneuvers and hopefully rescue them. But I was always ready in case their vehicle blew up or something to come back without them.
To test a landing approach, the LEM drops to within 9 miles of the moon's surface and gets a good look at the site NASA has selected for the first touchdown. Skimming the surface at nearly 3,700 miles an hour, Cernan peers out his window at Lunar Mountains.
We is down among them, Charlie. Roger, I hear you weaving your way up the freeway.
Roger, fantastic, Charlie, fantastic.
I felt like I had to pick up my feet to keep from dragging my heels on the top of those mountains. When you move that fast across the surface and you're that close, it's an overpowering experience.
On their second flyover, the experience turns almost deadly when the lunar module tumbles out of control.
I saw the lunar horizon 8 times in 15 seconds in all different directions. That was a man-made problem because we were switching computers to check out a little backup computer we had. The guidance switch had to go in the other direction. I had already put it in the other direction. And so Tom went and moved it in the other direction. And so the computer that had the spacecraft at that moment didn't know where it was. But Tom was able to stop it, control it.
Finally, as in the comics, Snoopy, returns to his master, Charlie Brown. Even before Apollo 10 enters lunar orbit, the Apollo 11 spacecraft has been rolled out to the launch pad atop its Saturn V rocket. In less than 2 months, its crew will try and safely set it down on the moon.
That's one small step for man.
I was in the student houses at Caltech, and we were watching the TV and all the excitement about, landing on another celestial object. And I had no idea that one day I'll become the director of JPL. But reflecting back on it, I mean, that was really something I remember forever.
One giant leap for mankind.
They've all been to space before. Commander Neil Armstrong on Gemini 8, Command Module Pilot Michael Collins on Gemini 10. Lunar Module Pilot Buzz Aldrin set an EVA record on the final Gemini flight. The morning of July 16, 1969, spectators line the beaches around the Kennedy Space Center. America will attempt to end the space race. Moon fever is rampant.
And there was just great excitement, and you could hear lots of people saying, gosh, this is almost, I can't believe that somebody's going to go to the moon.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6.
At 9:32 a.m., the Saturn V's giant engines roar to life. At the viewing stand 3 miles away, spectators feel the thunderous drumbeat of unearthly power pounding their chests as the heat of the rocket's exhaust washes over them.
When that rumble came across the ground, it was like somebody was putting their hands on your chest and pressing. I almost couldn't breathe. It was so unbelievable that the United States was going to send 2 men to walk on the surface of the moon. It was almost unthinkable.
For 3 days, the crew of Apollo 11 cruises towards the moon, then drops its spacecraft into lunar orbit.
I just thought there were so many unknowns that I would have given us about a 50-50 chance of being the first flight to land and return someone safely.
With Collins remaining in the command module, Armstrong and Aldrin prepare the LEM and themselves to become the first humans on the moon.
Okay, all flight controllers, go for landing. Retro. Go. Fido. Go. Guidance. Go. Control. Go. Telcom. Go. GNC. Go. Roger. Copy. Surgeon. Go. Capcom, we're go for landing. Eagle, Houston, you're go for landing. Over.
But the landing veers from the planned script. As the LEM nears the surface, the onboard computer flashes an alarm the crew doesn't recognize.
1201. 1201. Roger, 1201 alarm.
Any one of thousands of technical glitches could abort the landing. But Houston quickly diagnoses the problem as non-critical, an overloaded computer.
1201 alarm. Same type, we're go flight. Okay, we're go. Same type, we're go.
That's when real trouble threatens the mission.
540 feet down at 30 and at 15.
As the LEM pitches upright about a mile above the moon's surface, Armstrong gets his first look at where computers will set them down. A field of boulders, any one of which could prove deadly. Armstrong wraps his hand around the joystick and takes manual control.
3.5 down, 220 feet. 13 forward.
With fuel running out, Armstrong flies the LEM like a helicopter. Aldrin keeps his eye on their altitude, forward speed, and rate of descent, calling out the numbers.
100 feet, 3.5 down, 9 forward.
At 60 seconds, we're still 100 feet up. I was nervous. Okay, at 30 seconds, we were 10 feet. I figured we had it made. But 100 feet, or thereabouts, at 60 seconds, you could very easily just not be where you want to be.
Forward, drift into the right a little.
Sort of like driving your car when the gas gauge is reading empty, but you know that when it gets down there, you got a few more miles left. Well, that was the situation we faced. And I think it was in the last seconds. Everybody was holding their breath. It was pretty dicey.
Contact light. Okay, engine stop. APA at a descent. Mode control, both auto, descent engine command override off. Engine arm off. 413 is in. We've had shutdown. We copy you down, Eagle. Okay, everybody, T1. Stand by for T1. Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Man on the moon. Ooh. Oh, boy.
Thank you. You're looking good here.
Boy.
Okay, we're going to be busy for a minute.
Like people around the world, of every persuasion and from every walk of life, mission controllers in Houston are overwhelmed.
Okay, keep the chatter down in this room.
Now, in the control room, we had work to do because we had to very rapidly look at the spacecraft systems and give the crew a stay-no-stay decision that everything was safe to remain in the moon, and we had to accomplish that within the first 2 minutes.
Okay, T1, stay, no stay, retro. Stay. Fido, stay. Guidance, stay. Control, stay. Telcom, stay. GNC, stay. Ecom, stay. Surgeon, stay. Capcom, we're stay for T1.
So basically, we had to keep our emotions in check and keep the chatter down for the first 2 hours after landing while everybody in the entire world was celebrating.
And we're getting a picture on the TV. You got a good picture, huh?
It's distorted, flickering, and at first, upside down. But a small black and white television camera mounted outside the LEM gives the world its first live glimpse of an alien landscape. No one is more interested in seeing that first picture than the man responsible for bringing it to everyone's TV.
This whole mission was now about television, in my mind. There were hundreds of millions of people watching, waiting to see the first step on the moon and people on the moon, see a spacecraft on the moon, anything. And if it doesn't work, then probably people actually will know my name years from now as the guy who didn't bring you television from the moon.
Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now.
The world just marveled at this right along with us, and we more or less made the whole world our partners in this thing by inviting people to be there during the launches. And I think that's one of the best things we ever did in the space program. One of the best decisions ever made with regard to the space program was to share that with the world.
Okay, I just checked getting back up to that first step. That isn't collapsed too far, but it's adequate to get back up.
More than 500 million people around the globe watch as Armstrong first makes sure he can get back into the LEM, then gives the first eyewitness account from the lunar surface.
The surface appears to be very, very fine-grained as you get close to it. It's almost like a powder.
6.5 hours after landing on the Sea of Tranquility, Neil Armstrong steps off the footpad of the lunar lander and ends the race to the moon.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
For 2 hours and 31 minutes, Armstrong and Aldrin share their observations.
The surface is fine and powdery. I can pick it up loosely with my toe. There seems to be no difficulty in moving around as we suspected. It has a stark beauty all its own. It's like much of the high desert of the United States. It's different, but it's very pretty out here. Beautiful view. Isn't that something? Magnificent sight out here. Magnificent desolation.
Aldrin says magnificent, but thinks otherwise.
What a desolate place we just landed on. Absolutely no life, no color, really, until you get down and look at the minerals in the rocks, because everything's covered with this little dust.
They are the only two beings here, but Armstrong and Aldrin have come for all humanity.
Here, men from the planet Earth, first set foot upon the moon, July 1969, AD. It came in peace for all mankind. The primary and secondary struts are in good shape.
With future moon landings dependent upon its integrity, the LEM is examined closely.
Antennas are all in place. There's no evidence of problem underneath the LEM due to either the engine exhaust or drainage of any kind.
What little science this mission has time for is conducted with a seismometer. A core sampling is taken.
I hope you're watching how hard I have to hit this into the ground to the tune of about 5 inches, Houston.
No trip is complete without souvenirs. Commander Armstrong tallies up their take of moon rocks for study back on Earth.
And we got about, I'd say 20 pounds of carefully selected, if not documented, samples. Houston, roger, well done, out.
As Armstrong and Aldrin study the moon, controllers in Houston watch closely over them. Their life-sustaining suits have limited supplies of oxygen and power, and they're reaching their safety margins.
Buzz, this is Houston. It's about time for you to start your EVA closeout activities. Roger.
19 minutes later, the first moonwalk is over.
Okay, the hatch is closed and latched.
As the ascent stage of the Eagle takes flight and Tranquility Base recedes beneath it, the magnitude of the accomplishment begins to sink in for Chris Kraft.
In terms of technology, in terms of advancement of the state of the art in science and technology, it was probably the most productive 10 years in the history of man. And when you reflect back on it, it probably was even greater than I could comprehend today.
With a scant 5 months to spare, NASA has met President Kennedy's goal. America has gained preeminence in human spaceflight. Yet it's only the beginning. Lunar exploration and science are Apollo's new mission, and the program will land 10 more men on the moon to fulfill it.
That's one small step for man.
We're in the viewing room at the Mission Control Center in Houston, watching the terminal phase of that flight and the landing itself on the moon. I was telling Neil not to land because we were next. But he did a great job.
One giant leap for mankind.
Every Apollo mission starts the same. 3 men in a capsule sit atop the giant Saturn V rocket, waiting for its monstrous engines to propel them off the Earth. The 3-stage Saturn V stands 363 feet tall, and at launch weighs more than 6 million pounds. Its 3 stages generate nearly 9 million pounds of thrust. It is the largest rocket ever flown.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engines running. Commit. Liftoff.
When Apollo 12 leaves Pad 39A on the second moon landing mission, the Saturn V proves its mettle. 36 seconds after lifting off in a rainstorm, lightning hits the rocket and waylays the crew's control panel.
I don't know what happened here. We had everything in the world drop out. I'm not sure if you get hit by lightning.
16 seconds later, as if to confirm Commander Pete Conrad's theory, a second lightning bolt strikes the rocket. Command Module Pilot Dick Gordon watches his entire electrical system shut down.
The moment of the lightning strike, the reverse current relays did their job and shut down the fuel cells. So we were not receiving any electrical power from the fuel cells, which was our main source of electrical energy. Fortunately, at that time, the batteries were on the line for the launch itself, so we had electrical power, and that really saved us from automatic abort.
13 Saturn V rockets fly during Apollo, including every moon mission. Although anomalies occur, no Saturn V ever fails.
I think I see my crater. Hey, baby, I'm not sure.
Including Apollo 12's.
There it is! Son of a gun, right down the middle of the road!
A major goal of the mission is to execute a pinpoint landing in an area called the Ocean of Storms.
So NASA said, we're going to demonstrate this by picking a certain crater, and then we'll send you there. And the crater we're going to pick is the one that has Surveyor 3 in, that landed inside this crater some 33 months earlier.
Man, that may have been a small one for Neil, but that's a long one for me.
And we landed, and the first thing Pete did when he got out was go around and looked and see if Surveyor was in that crater.
Boy, you'll never believe it. That's what I see sitting on the side of the crater. The old Surveyor, huh? The old Surveyor, yes, sir. Does that look neat? It can't be any further than 600 feet from here. We have a good shot of you there, Pete.
Live television from the moon is now in color.
Okay, Houston, I'm going to move the TV camera now.
But the achievement is short-lived when Alan Bean accidentally points the camera at the sun and burns out its video tube.
Pete and I didn't know that, and so when it burns out, we're standing around not knowing why. Now, the people on the ground knew immediately why, but they never told us. They never said, you pointed it at the sun, it's ruined forever.
Al, we have a pretty bright image on that TV. Could you either move it or stop it down? That's as far as it goes, Houston. How does that look to you? No, it still is the same, Al.
Big disappointment to all of us and everyone on Earth. Someone told me one day, they said, there's one thing good about it that came out of it. We used to have discussions that maybe we shouldn't have a TV. They said, after your mission, never had that discussion anymore. Everybody agreed we needed TV.
NASA closes out the 60s by landing humans on the moon. Not once, but twice. The third attempt comes to be known as NASA's most successful failure.
Okay, Houston, we've had a problem here. That's one small step for man.
It's pretty indelible. I remember sitting in my parents' bedroom in front of the old black and white Zenith. It was truly an incredible moment, and I knew that I was witnessing something that was absolutely a turning point in human history.
One giant leap for mankind.
Apollo 13, the third planned moon landing. Commander Jim Lovell's second trip to the moon. This time, he'll not only orbit the lunar surface, but also leave his footprints in its powdery dust.
Houston, we've had a problem.
But instead of describing a lunar landscape, Lovell finds himself halfway to the moon, talking with Mission Control about his dying command module.
Main B bus undervolt.
Roger, main B undervolt. Stand by, 13, we're looking at it.
Electrical power is disrupted, and readings in the capsule and at Mission Control don't jibe. Then Lovell sees something out his window.
Now, looks to me, you're looking out the hatch that we are venting something. We are venting something out into space.
The explosion of an oxygen tank in the service module has damaged several key systems. The astronauts must scour 24 instruments, 40 alarm indicators, 71 lights, and 566 switches to regain control of their spacecraft.
With the loss of oxygen, because we used oxygen to produce electricity, all of our electrical power would quit. And when that happened, because we controlled our engine by means of electrical power, we'd lose the entire propulsion system. And so, you know, essentially it took a while for all that to sink in, that it dawned on me that we were in very serious trouble.
The crew of Apollo 13 never gets the chance to land on the moon. They can only slingshot around it and, with their lunar module Aquarius as their lifeboat, hope to make their way safely back to Earth.
We had to invent ways to navigate. We had to find ways to stretch the electrical power. Our crew was suffocating. We had to find ways to remove the carbon dioxide so the crew wouldn't suffer from CO2 poisoning.
We never had discussed the possibility of not surviving or getting back to the Earth. It was probably in all of our minds, but we were working hard to figure out what we had to work with and what we had to do to get back.
The command module, shut down and unheated for 3 days, would now have to be restarted. Condensation is everywhere.
The whole instrument panel was covered with water, and of course I knew that there was water probably behind the panel on all the wiring harnesses, and so we worried about electric shorts. We were virtually going down rows and pushing in circuit breakers. We figured the best we could do is we started down the row and started smelling. You can smell electric short. We'd back up and pull some out and hope we could quickly isolate which was the culprit.
But there are no shorts, due perhaps to the capsule redesign after the Apollo 1 fire. Sealing the electrical connections also means they're now waterproof for landing.
Let's get it. Farewell, Aquarius. We thank you.
After its harrowing 6-day ordeal, Apollo 13 safely splashes down in the Pacific. The moon landing mission may have failed, but Flight Director Gene Kranz remembers it as the space team's finest hour.
NASA contractor, people out in subcontractors, and test facilities, and individual. It was really, really amazing to be at the point of the spear and watch this team perform, basically against all odds, and to come up with solutions that we had never trained or thought about before.
While just getting to the moon can prove difficult, landing on its dusty, boulder-strewn, cratered surface is even more problematic. A lunar lander must maneuver like a helicopter, with its rotors replaced by rocket engines. Training with the LEM in Earth's atmosphere is impossible, so the Lunar Lander Research Vehicle is used. The Apollo astronauts call it the flying bedstead. To simulate the 1/6 gravity of the moon, the LLRV's central jet engine supports most of the vehicle's weight. But flying the LLRV is dangerous. On the afternoon of May 6, 1968, the craft nearly kills Neil Armstrong. Astronaut Bill Anders had flown the same vehicle just hours earlier.
The thing flamed out. The attitude control system ran out of fuel, and so Neil was flopping around there and just managed to get out of it. Well, he was very lucky because this thing was just on its main engine with no attitude control, and it was getting close to the ground, and it just kind of rolled out, and Neil looked like he came out of the fireball. And it did look like he went back into the fireball when he with his parachute, but he landed just beyond it.
4 of these earthbound trainers are used. 3 will crash, but the actual lunar modules land safely every time.
There's good stuff. Okay, now looking great. 60 seconds. 40 feet. 3 feet per second.
America's first astronaut, Alan Shepard, returns to spaceflight 10 years later to command Apollo 14's LEM and Terry's to a skillful setdown.
We're on the surface. Okay, we made a good landing.
Apollo 14 is on the moon almost 34 hours. About a third of that time is spent moonwalking in the lunar highlands.
Certainly the Fra Mauro area where we landed was an interesting place, and with far more relief up and down of the terrain than the earlier flights, which also made the navigation a little more difficult. Particularly, it was kind of like wandering around in the sand dunes, and one sand dune looks about like the other. So finding our landmarks that the geologists wanted us to find as we did our traverse on foot to Cone Crater was difficult.
I'm going to try a little sand trap shot here.
But Shepard manages a few seconds to become not only America's first man in space, but also its first golfer.
Miles and miles and miles.
2 miles is all the Apollo 14 astronauts are able to walk during their 2 EVAs. But the next mission will have wheels.
This is really a rock and rollin' ride, isn't it? That's one small step for man. Beautiful, beautiful. Isn't that something?
I was in Orlando in my parents' house, and as the first pictures came through, we were, of course, all just very enthusiastic and enthralled with what was happening.
One giant leap for mankind. Okay, Houston, as I stand out here in the wonders of the unknown in Hadley, I sort of realize there's a fundamental truth to our nature. Man must explore.
When Apollo 15 Commander Dave Scott descends the LEMS ladder 2 years after Neil Armstrong, he achieves his own first. Scott climbs aboard the first lunar rover with crewmate Jim Irwin, and, as space first motorist, proceeds to peel out.
This is really a rock and rollin' ride, isn't it? Never been on a ride like this before. Oh boy. I'm glad they got this great suspension system on this thing.
More than just a toy, the moon buggy is a science platform, allowing astronauts to venture farther from the LEM than the previous 3 Apollo missions. During 10.5 hours, Scott and Irwin cover 17 miles and examine many interesting sights.
A boulder exposed to the surface here, which has got layering within it. It's been weathered away apparently, and just the surface top is exposed, but the boulder must be about a meter long with 2 to 3 inch layers in it.
Working in a suit is very fatiguing. You don't get the food, the water, the rest. So actually we were not only probing the boundaries of geology and exploration, we were also probing the boundaries of human performance. The Apollo 15 mission really took us back to the drawing board in several areas to look at how we train crews, and how we provide them adequate nutrition and hydration and all of these things.
Hey, John, this is perfect with the LEM and the rover and you and Stone Mountain and the old flag. Come on out here and give me a salute. Big Navy salute.
In the summer of 1972, Apollo 16 astronauts John Young and Charlie Duke spend 20 hours searching for volcanic rock in the Descartes Highlands.
Charlie, such form. Oh, Stephen. How about that? I'm going out for the ballet when I get back. You learn another line of work up here.
Because of the geological diversity of the moon, they wanted to get some samples from the mountains of the moon, if you will, or the highlands, which was a considerable elevation above the Luna Mare.
That is the most beautiful sight. What's that? You're standing there on the rim of that crater.
Well, it's great to have a lunar rover. When you turn wheels, the front wheels would go this way and the rear wheels would go that way. So you could turn in your own diameter. And because of all the holes on the moon, you need to be able to do that.
Here he comes, folks. He's got the hammer out. I knew he couldn't resist.
I don't know if this will work or not, Charlie, but it couldn't pick a better spot.
Here we go. Hot dog. He did it. It's a very friable rock, apparently, Houston. Okay, outstanding.
Science was certainly in the front seat. Of the 6 landings on the moon, the last 3, I think, were devoted completely to the science of it.
We'll sample right there and get you a scoopful of this underlying regolith.
there'll be just one more flight to the moon. Apollo 17 lifts off in the midnight hour of December 7th, 1972.
My God, it was like the sun coming up in the middle of the night. I mean, all of a sudden, this golden light, this flame that was the color of a sunrise, just exploding and filling the sky and filling my field of view, and in silence seeing this rocket ascend, and then without anticipating it, this roar of sound that just swept over us. It was absolutely spectacular. I mean, I've seen launches since then, but I don't think anything can compare with knowing that you're seeing 3 people who are on their way to the moon.
Okay, stand by for pitch over. Oh, are we coming in? Oh, baby. And there it is, Houston. There's Camelot. Right on target. I see it.
Being the last mission, we built on all the other missions before us. And so our landing site was in the northeastern edge of the moon, which was off-center. We landed in a valley, the Valley of Torres Litro, that was surrounded by mountains on 3 sides, higher than a Grand Canyon is deep. About, I don't know, give or take 20 miles long and maybe 5 miles across.
Okay, Houston, the Challenger has landed.
Roger, Challenger, that's super.
Houston, you can tell America that Challenger is at Torres Litro.
We landed within a couple hundred feet of our landing site. Pretty exciting.
Hippity hopping over hill and dale. Da 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 da. Hippity hopping along.
If America's moon missions must end with Apollo 17, Commander Gene Cernan makes it memorable.
Can you use the other end against the right side of the rock? I'll press it. Oh,
His partner, Jack Schmidt, is the only trained geologist to fly to the moon. At times, his mission zeal overtakes his ability to traverse the terrain.
No, dadgummit. Well, hey, Gene, would you go over and help twinkle toes, please, Gene? Really?
Well, working on the moon is a lot of fun. I mean, it's like walking around on a giant trampoline all the time, and you're just as strong as you were here on Earth, but you don't weigh as much. You only weigh 1/6 of what you weigh on the moon, even with a suit. In the backpack, my total weight was only 61 pounds.
Cernan has been to space twice before, including on Apollo 10's lunar orbit checkout of the LEM. Yet Cernan is awestruck by this valley and what hangs in the pitch-black sky overhead.
You have to pinch yourself when you're on the moon. Am I really here at this point in time in space? And the answer is yes, but it's almost like you're in the middle of some science fiction plot, because back there is the Earth, the multicolored blues of the oceans and the whites of the snow and the cloud you see from pole to pole, across oceans. Every 12 hours you look at the other side of the world. It truly is an ongoing, overpowering experience.
Meanwhile, Schmidt finds unexpected color in the gray moonscape.
There is orange soil. Well, don't move it till I see it. It's all over. Orange. Don't move it till I see it. I've stirred it up with my feet. Hey, it is! I can see it from here. It's orange.
Once it was back in the laboratory, everyone realized it was volcanic material that had been erupted in the valley and somehow protected for 3.5 billion years without getting mixed up with everything else. And it has become a very, very important sample, an increasingly important sample in trying to decipher what the actual origin of the moon might be.
The next day, Cernan ends Apollo 17's 75-hour sortie as the last man on the moon.
This valley of history has seen mankind complete its first evolutionary steps into the universe, leaving the planet Earth and going forward into the universe. I think no more significant contribution has Apollo made to history. It's not often that you can foretell history, but I think we can in this case.
When I left the moon and made those final steps, look back down, and at my last footstep on the moon, I'm not coming this way again. I wanted to stop the clock. I wanted to push the freeze button. I needed time to try and understand where I've been and what I've done, what the last 75 hours have meant to me, have meant to you. Was the risk worth what I have just, whatever it was I've just done and wherever I've been? I couldn't stop the clock and look back at the Earth and came to the conclusion, you know, I don't know what it all means yet, but I've been lucky.
On December 14th, 1972, human exploration of the moon is ceased.
2, 1, ignition. Right away, Houston.
What I felt was a sense of disappointment at a great adventure that was ending before its time. And also the sense of a grand human adventure that had ended too soon. We had just begun to scratch the surface of what the moon could tell us. And we go there and we can actually turn the pages in the earliest history of the solar system, which is recorded on the moon like no other place in the solar system.
Apollo really was a blip in human history in a number of ways, but it was an anomaly that I think the country will never forget, the world will never forget. I think it was worth it, not only for in the geopolitical context, which is what drove the whole thing, but also from the exploration context.
I am not the last man to have walked on the moon. Maybe the last man of Apollo, maybe the last man of the 20th century, but not the last person, not the last man or possibly the last woman to have walked on the moon.
Today, the moon is again coming within our grasp. And again, 40 years later, Apollo will help us reach it. A new generation of moon machines is being built and tested. Many of the new designs are directly descended from Apollo hardware, including the lunar lander. Engineers are eager to hear from the man who flew the first one to land.
And I don't know exactly where this CG is and so on, but sometimes the amount of motion that you get at the cockpit is different than the amount that the footpads are seeing by a substantial margin. And you have to get a sense of that to know how careful you have to be up on top to make sure the bottom is doing the right thing.
The next generation lunar rover will bear little resemblance to the Apollo buggy. Its explorers will drive the moonscape in shirt sleeves.
The key thing about this vehicle is it's a small pressurized rover, so we actually live in the vehicle under pressure. The suits are hanging off the back on devices called suit ports. What we do is we literally open a hatch inside the vehicle, open the back hatch of the suit, step into the suit, and 10 minutes later we're boots on the surface sampling rocks. In an Apollo-style unpressurized rover, you've got 8 hours of consumables in your suit, so you have to go out and turn around and come back at the end of each day, whereas here we're going to live in it.
The next astronauts to make footprints in the lunar dust will stay longer, explore farther, and learn more than ever hoped for on July 20th, 1969, when Apollo 11 changed the world forever.
It's something that I always hoped would happen in my lifetime, and to see it happening now, to potentially be a part of it, and whether it's my foot on the moon or one of my classmates or somebody from my generation is going to do it, and I think it's great.
We did a lot of great work in the 1960s and 70s when we went to the moon, but unfortunately we didn't stay there very long. Now, with their experience, especially under the belt of what we got from the International Space Station and the capability that the Crew Exploration Vehicle gives us, we can actually really explore the moon. It's a whole new planet, a whole new world to go explore, and we've only been to 6 little small spots on it. Now we can go more places. We have a chance to stay there longer.
The human endeavor which people put forth to get us to the moon is the human endeavor we once again need. The spirit of Apollo, the legacy of Apollo, is that human endeavor to do what has never been done before, to reach further than we've ever reached before, to be willing to try, to not be deterred by failure. That's what Apollo was all about.
And as the centuries unfold, we'll go many, many places, but this is the first, and this needs to be remembered as one of the wonderful things of the 20th century. It is a great adventure.
Through the years, RCA Victor has built a tradition of continually introducing new ideas and products to bring new thrills and pleasures to millions in home entertainment. In keeping with that tradition, RCA Victor now offers a completely new development for new listening enjoyment with tape. Watch this. How long do you think it takes the average person to take off one tape and thread in a new one? 2 2/5 seconds? 32 1/5? Or 1 minute and 10 seconds? Let's find out. Ready, set, go. 2 2/5 seconds exactly. How did she do it? Here's how. The new RCA Victor conceived, developed, and designed tape cartridge for easy magazine loading to make playing a tape as simple as or even easier than playing a record. Simple, convenient, practical. The first truly sensible approach to tape. But that's only part of the story. The new cartridge cuts basic tape costs to 1/4 of what they used to be for the same playing time. And here's how. The old reel-type stereo tapes carried 2 soundtracks, 1 for each speaker system. The new cartridge tape carries not just 2, but 4 tracks, 2 in each direction for stereo or 4 tracks for monaural, giving twice the playing time for the same length of tape. For monaural home recording, all 4 tracks can be used, giving 4 times the playing time, giving you more uninterrupted music than is possible from a full stack of 45 RPM records on an automatic phonograph. And there's even more. On the old type tape recorders, the slowest speed at which music could be satisfactorily recorded and played was 7 1/2 inches per second. But now, high fidelity music at the new low speed of only 3 3/4 inches per second, made possible by the development of precision-controlled RCA Victor sound heads and precision-balanced motors, the product of 4 1/2 years of research. And to be manufactured in RCA Victor's own Cambridge, Ohio factory. 1 whole hour of stereophonic music or 2 hours monaural in a single tape cartridge. In the past, stereophonic tapes like this one gave about 36 minutes of music and cost about as much as 3 LP records. But with the new tape cartridge with easy magazine loading, living stereo will be available at a cost of a little more than 1 LP record. Along with the new tape cartridge goes a complete line of brand new RCA Victor tape cartridge recorders and players in a complete price range to put the ultimate in high fidelity music listening and home recording pleasure within the reach of everyone. All models both play and record, while all the stereo semi-automatics and fully automatic models record stereophonically as well as monaurally, bringing the new thrill of living stereo to home recording. All models feature a fast forward action as well as a fast reverse for editing and selection. All models also feature an automatic shutoff that turns off the machine when the tape has finished playing. The tape is now completely rewound, ready for playing. No need for rewinding. The new tape cartridge is at all times ready for play. The new RCA Victor Deluxe models include the completely automatic features of reversing and shutting off, playing up to 2 hours of music at the push of one button, making it unnecessary even to turn the cartridge over. Presto, tape reversed, sound head switched to the B track, all without the touch of a hand. And now some more features of the dramatically new RCA development. For easy, convenient indexing, you have first the footage counter, giving you an indication at all times of how much tape has been recorded or played. Second, 2 conveniently located windows to provide a further visual check on how much tape remains on each reel. Third, for easy reference, the first side of each selection is labeled A, while the second side is labeled B. Conveniently packaged in a rugged polystyrene case that keeps the tape protected against damage. A package actually containing twice as much music as is found on the conventional 7-inch pre-recorded tape reel. All in one small, neat cartridge that does not need a spare second reel for winding and rewinding. A simple brake holds the reels firmly, prevents tape unwinding and fouling in shipment or handling, virtually foolproof. When the cartridge is magazine loaded in position to play, the brake is automatically released. 2 easily removable screws permit the cartridge to be opened to edit or repair the tape. No need to worry about your pre-recorded music tapes being accidentally erased. It can't happen. All cartridges include a special feature that makes accidental erasure of pre-recorded tapes impossible. So simple, so convenient, so practical, so easy to use, and with all the unquestioned advantages of tape. Now ready to move the tape recorder out of the closet and into the living room where it belongs, as part of the newest and most exciting home entertainment center for the entire family. One more keenly significant example of RCA's aggressive leadership, playing a vital role in developing a dramatic new product to further and advance a great new industry, the tape cartridge.
It wasn't so long ago in the history of man's voyage toward a better world that ships were carrying eager passengers toward the shores of a new nation that was just in the building. Our forefathers were constructing the foundation of this nation by interlocking inseparably the blocks of our political and economic freedoms. of life our forefathers established on this foundation of freedoms drew people from the far corners of the earth. And all those who set foot on these shores had the opportunity to build a better life for themselves. Even young Jonathan, an unskilled lad from across the sea, hoped to find a job where he could progress according to his ability and enterprise. As the years passed, Jonathan's earnings increased. But he still felt that for a man of his skill, it was about time for another raise.
Mr. Blessgravy, am I not the best crown rounder and brim trimmer in ye business? Then verily, methinks I am worth more moolah.
That you are, Jonathan. I'm sorry, lad.
No raise, Mr. Blessgravy? I quit. Sales and profits down. Phooey, I could run ye business better myself. Hey, why not? My own business. All you need's a little capital, a little push, and an idea. Yeah, an idea. Let's see.
So I said to him, I wouldn't wear that hat to a dog fight. Why, there isn't a decent hat in the entire village. And such prices. Imagine paying that much for a poke bonnet. Why, it was an awful thing.
Why not? Women's hats. My own business.
Fortunately, Jonathan was thrifty enough to keep a little nest egg for such an emergency. Well, the cost of the building took care of the nest egg. And there was nothing left to pay for the necessary tools and equipment. But happily, Jonathan had a good reputation, and as his idea promised a profit, his friends and neighbors were willing to invest some of their savings in his new business. In the nick of time, an enterprising chap showed up with the raw materials to make hats. And before long, Jonathan was open for business. First, he had to advertise.
Shop at Fontan, it's the spot. 12 new hat styles, that's a lot. Ladies, get that new hat thrill. 30 days to pay your bill.
As an expert salesman, Jonathan demonstrated the superior style and quality of his product. He set a price for his creations that the consumer was willing to pay, and sales dollars poured in from satisfied customers. Jonathan had big dreams of the wonderful rewards of being in business for himself. But before he could buy what he wanted, his employees' wages had to be paid. He had to pay taxes. And his friends who helped finance the business had to be paid a return on their investment. When all of his bills were paid, Jonathan had to exchange his big dream for a little dream.
Mesdames, mademoiselles, it is the privilege of Alphonse, hat stylist to all the grand heads of Europe, to bring you hats with style so chic, a quality magnifique, and a price, ooh la la, so low. Come one, come all to the grand opening.
To meet competition, Jonathan had to plow part of his profits back into the business to develop a better hat. If customers approved the quality, style, and price of Jonathan's new designs, he still could make his dreams come true. With the passing years, this strong foundation of freedoms protected the dignity of the individual and his family, gave everyone the right to worship as he pleased, and promised anyone with ability and enterprise the opportunity to participate in the building of the American way of life as we know it today. A way of life that depends upon millions of thrifty Americans who send a portion of their savings to work in our business system each year. People from all walks of life, workers, farmers, housewives, all of us send our dollars to work in our business system in the hope of earning dividends or interest on our investments. Anyone who has an insurance policy, a bank deposit, or a share of stock is helping to finance our business system. A constant stream of savings dollars must flow into big and small business each year. These dollars help to buy the land, the buildings, the tools and equipment, and create new job opportunities for our expanding population. The goods we produce are distributed to main streets all over the country. While the Main Street of today doesn't look much like the Main Street of Jonathan's time, the principles of our business system remain the same. For businessmen still compete with one another for the consumer's supply of spendable dollars. And Mrs. Consumer is still mighty critical of everything she buys. Uh-oh, competition. The management of every business has a continuing problem to improve their product to stay ahead of competition, or else.
Okay, men, this is it. Quick Chill's got the ball. We've got to get it back. Give them that new product play. More style, better quality, new features, and at the right price. Hit the line, men. Let's go.
Micrometer, wrench, file, caliper, slide rule.
In addition to creating a better product, management develops new tools and more efficient methods to help workers turn out more boxes to sell at a price Mrs. Consumer will pay. New features about this better product are advertised to point out its competitive advantages.
The Auto Magic Permafreeze, with plenty of room for groceries galore. The Auto Magic Permafreeze, with the super duper store-o-matic door. Just press the button for your ice, a feature that is new, and extra space all over the place for other items too. In the Auto Magic Permafreeze, so see your dealer right away. Get a Permafreeze today.
Ah, yes, dear lady. Permafreeze is your kind of refrigerator. High quality at a low price.
Sales dollars from satisfied customers once again flow back to Permafreeze. A successful business must have enough sales dollars coming in to enable management to pay the expenses of doing business, such as salaries and wages, materials and supplies, research and product development, plant maintenance and repair. In addition to all of these bills, management has to pay taxes to local, state, and federal governments. Any money that's left over is known as profit. Wise management plows part of it back into the business. The remainder of the profit is paid out as dividends. These dividends are sent back to investors as a reward for risking their savings in the American business system. although occasionally some of us pick a lemon and have to take a loss. The constant investment of our savings through good times and bad has enabled our competitive business system to continue to increase the production of more and better goods to meet the demands of our rising population for a better standard of living. For example, it was only a little more than half a century ago that the average worker had only inefficient tools to help him turn out a product. Low production meant low wages. In 1900, many men had to work 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, to earn enough money to provide their families with the bare essentials. Hand labor was the rule in the home as well as the factory. In many families, the youngsters had to work to add their earnings to the family budget and forego the opportunity to get an education. And with most families in those days, the standard of living left much to be desired. A half-century later, we had invested enough in our business system to provide the average worker with efficient and expensive buildings and machinery to enable him to produce enough in a 40-hour week to earn twice as much as the 1900 worker earned in a 60-hour week. This shorter work week gives us all more leisure time to enjoy a standard of living beyond the wildest dreams of anyone who lived a half-century ago. The more we earn, the more our families have to spend for the things they need and want. Young people today have leisure time for fun and enjoy educational opportunities denied their fathers and grandfathers. And fortunately, we have been able to raise our standard of living without sacrificing the spiritual side of life, which means so much to the American family. Our business system has continued to provide a better life for our increasing population, in spite of destructive forces which have pounded against our foundation of freedoms with no avail. However, wars, or the threat of wars, interrupt the normal operations of our competitive business system and may result in government controls which crack essential blocks in our foundation of freedoms. In World War II, wages were controlled. Many workers were frozen to their jobs. Farm prices were controlled. And profits of business were limited. Raw materials were allocated between essential and non-essential business. On Main Street, USA, many of us found less to buy because a good portion of our productive capacity went to the war effort. Prices were fixed, and the available supply of goods was rationed. In war emergencies, we allow government to restrict certain of our freedoms. But we Americans have learned to remove government controls as quickly as possible and to repair the blocks in the foundation of our freedoms to allow our business system to resume its normal operations. While we invest part of our savings to help finance the world's most efficient business system, at the same time we pay taxes to government to finance many kinds of services which also contribute to our way of life. For example, our taxes must provide the necessary funds to improve and expand our school system. Our taxes must be sufficient to pay for city streets, health, fire, and police protection, and of course, aid to the needy. Our state taxes help pay for highways, educational institutions, and among other things, help to finance important experiments to increase the productivity of our farms. Our federal taxes pay for irrigation and reclamation projects, for national parks, postal services, the Weather Bureau, and many other services. Our taxes have to pay for the enormous cost of past wars and provide the funds for a defense program which will ensure the safety of our country. In addition, all of us should be willing to pay whatever taxes are necessary to enable efficient government to improve or expand any essential service. But with our present tax load, we should avoid pressuring government for any new services that aren't absolutely necessary. Because we all know the more our government provides, the more taxes it's forced to collect. None of us can escape. Big business. Small business. Farmers. Workers. Housewives, and all of us have to pay our share. Demanding more and more from government could create a tax burden heavy enough to crack essential blocks in the foundation of our business system. Therefore, we shouldn't let our taxes reach a point where they destroy our ability to save and invest. For as we have seen, our rising standard of living depends upon a constant flow of savings dollars into our business system each year. In the future of our country, waves of destructive forces will continue to batter against our foundation. When any force weakens the interlocked blocks of our political and economic freedoms, as good citizens, we must be quick to use the tools our Constitution gives us and repair any cracks that may appear. As long as we keep the foundation of our business system strong, we shall be able to maintain and improve the way of life our forefathers conceived and established. A way of life which gave everyone who came to this country the chance to progress according to his ability and enterprise. Like the youth of yesterday, the young people of today deserve the same opportunity to earn success and accomplishment. And on this foundation of freedoms, continue to build a better life for themselves and their fellow man in the world of tomorrow.
Let's bring our editorial microscope into focus on a very significant phenomenon: the middle-income consumer. You may have met this character in Fortune's now famous series on the changing American market, which portrayed his dramatic rise into the dominant economic personality of our time. This 1953 study showed that the zoom in the American market after the war, the unprecedented volume of goods of all kinds gobbled up by an insatiable tide of buyers, was largely the work of this middle-income man. Let's update his story, its basic facts and figures, to the present day. The biggest single fact in the story is this: despite higher taxes, despite post-war inflation, the middle-income consumer has roughly 50% more spending power today than he had a generation ago. In real income, $240 billion. He has fed new demands into the production apparatus of industry, accounting for the housing boom, appliance sales,
the rush for prepared foods, even the once exclusive preserve of the exclusive rich. The luxury market has been invaded in force and virtually captured by the middle-income buyer. And this is only the seagoing phase of a campaign that has succeeded in changing the entire shape of the luxury market. How did it happen? Through a revolutionary change in the way U.S. income is distributed. In 1947, 27% of the population was in the middle income range, earning between $4,000 and $7,500 a year. In all, there were almost 13 million families in this bracket. By 1953, as Fortune told us, 5 million more families moved into this income category. Today, more than 1 million more families have promoted themselves to middle incomes. In terms of dollars, the families in this bracket now receive more than 42% of all income, real income. And their spending is just as real. Food is now a $64.5 billion market, up 8% since 1953. Clothing sales, up 6% from 1953. Housing, for the 7th straight year, the industry has topped 1 million starts. Home goods, furniture, TV, electrical appliances and such, up 15% since '53. The family car, 7.5 million autos bought in '55. So far, demand has matched the incredible pace of American productivity, stride for stride. Let's look at the production story a moment. Over the past century, production per man-hour showed an average increase of 2% per year. These 2 percentage points, compounded annually, doubled production over the last generation, quadrupled it over the last 2 generations. They made America. But see what has happened since 1947. The yearly rate of increase has risen 50%, and the implications of that rise are truly staggering. If sustained, as it seems likely to be, it will remake America. Production per man-hour is slated to redouble by 1980. But this productive potential, if it is to translate itself into standard of living, has got to be sold, and in large measure, sold to him. Thus, marketing becomes the pivot on which our continued prosperity turns. Marketing must make the growing production mesh with the expanding market. This is where the challenge now lies. To meet that challenge, American business has taken a new look at its own attitude to marketing and advertising. Over the past 30 years, the ups and downs of advertising activity kept pace with the ups and downs of consumer spending. When sales rose, promotional activities rose. When sales dropped, advertising dropped. But in 1949, and again in 1953 and '54, there was a change. As the volume of sales slid down, advertisers countered by moving the volume of advertising steadily up. For the first time, advertising and selling were allowed to create sales, instead of sales creating advertising and selling. How come? That's the question we put to a group of manufacturers recently. Here are the answers. The vice president of a leading camera company said, "In 1954, our advertising appropriation increased approximately 20% over 1953, whereas sales showed no change. As a result, we were able not only to hold our own in the marketplace, but to stabilize our employment levels." The president of a top oil company told us, "Our plans call for a continuation of our present aggressive advertising and promotional efforts. We fully expect our competitors to do likewise." The president of the #1 beverage company said, "Businessmen today regard advertising as an investment rather than just a business expense." And the president of a leading tire and rubber company put it this way, "Advertising and other sales activities should not move up and down with minor changes in the total volume of business. They should maintain a steady pace geared to the overall growth trend." These statements represent a very real and important change in business thinking. The feeling is abroad that aggressive advertising and marketing, while they may not prevent short cyclical downturns in the economy, nevertheless will have a strong stabilizing effect over the long haul. This is exactly what happened when 1955 moved far ahead of the 1953-54 dip. The basic reasons for the new outlook are, first, a new confidence in the ability of government to help maintain economic stability. Businessmen now recognize that government is better equipped and better able to help check an inflationary or deflationary cycle. That government is constantly on the alert for any sudden rise or fall in the business barometer. Second, and far more important, is the growing awareness of business leaders that the number one job of industry today is distribution. Moving the goods into the hands of consumers. Matching desires with income, prices with costs, consumption with production. This is the function of marketing. And marketing, as management now realizes, consists of all company operations, except only physical production. All the services that help move the product to the buyer. Marketing research, product designing, product testing, product servicing, merchandising, packaging, pricing, physical handling, storage and transportation, credit and financing, accounting and billing, sales organization, sales force, sales outlets, retail selling, advertising, public relations. Where's the kitchen sink? Well, if you happen to manufacture kitchen sinks, there it is, right on top. The tangible product whose distribution depends on the successful interplay of all these 17 marketing functions. A manufacturer has a complete marketing plan only if he has covered every one of these vital operations. A third reason why businessmen have turned increasing attention to creative marketing is the changing American market, expressed in the zooming birth rate, with bigger families back in style. The amazing mushroom growth of suburban America, the upgraded scale of income everywhere, and especially the new pattern of income distribution, which has let its bounty fall smack in the middle range of income. As these groups continue to benefit, as our birth rate and productivity grow, they open the door to new markets for additional goods and services to challenge the imagination. Marketing and advertising can and must rise to new heights as we come to grips with the opportunities that lie ahead. Our first and biggest opportunity is the expanding population. Markets are people with incomes and demands. In the past 2 years alone, our population has increased by 5 million, a new American every 2 minutes. According to reasonable estimates, we should reach 175 million by 1960. And as the 60s progress, the babies born in the 40s will be creating babies of their own, meaning a new surge in the birth rate. The promise for 1970 is a population of 195 million. Obviously, these figures are charged with meaning for those who process foods and manufacture drugs, footwear, and apparel. In fact, the increasing demand for goods and services is bound to reverberate throughout industry. Opportunity, highway construction. As a nation, our life is slowly being choked by our antiquated highway system. The government has a $100 billion highway program, which offers a profusion of opportunity for anyone with a stake in America, from the lady who likes her eggs country fresh, to the men who make road-building machinery, who can well look to a $250 million increase in sales a year. New highways mean steel of all kinds, and sales of steel can expect to increase by $344 million a year. Cement, concrete, asphalt, tar, road oils, an increase of $435 million a year. And just think of what will happen to the production, sales, and service of automobiles, truck and bus transportation, gasoline and oil and tires. These functions account for nearly 10 million jobs, meaning 10 million wage earners and their families better able to buy products of all kinds in every locality of the U.S. Opportunity, rewiring the home. It's a fact that 4 out of every 5 American homes cannot accommodate the electrical wonders of today. Why? Because most homes are not adequately wired for modern appliances. Here's a giant-size opportunity, an $8 billion order for raw materials producers of copper, steel, insulation, electrical appliance manufacturers and distributors, and the people who plan or work for them, public utilities, which must meet the resulting upsurge in demand for gas, oil, and electric power. Opportunity, urban redevelopment. Think of a business, any business, industrial or consumer, and then imagine the opportunities that would open for that business if our cities would step up their present redevelopment programs. Our cities need enlarged parking facilities, more bridges, redevelopment of slums. Add the crying need for new city schools, hospitals, and recreation centers, and urban redevelopment emerges as the biggest single task and opportunity ahead. Less tangible, but just as real, is the opportunity in new product development. The past is only an inkling of the future. And look at what jet planes, penicillin, nylon, television have meant to our economy and our workforce. This much is certain. 10 years from now, a good part of our workforce will be making products as yet unknown or now incubating in laboratories. A recent statement by a giant electrical company, referring especially to electronic and atomic energy, summed up the near future in these words: "The fields are so promising that we expect to produce more in the next 10 years than in all of the previous 75 years of our existence." Opportunity, the suburbs. 1/5 of America, over 32 million people, now live in the suburbs, and 1.25 million more are moving in each year. This shifting tide of population carries with it a clamor for new shopping centers, new schools, new highways, new fulfillments for off hours and leisure time. As it builds, suburbia becomes a green pasture for every conceivable type of insurance line. And suburban living opens new opportunities for beverages of all kinds, sporting goods, the entire spectrum of consumer goods and services. Opportunity, education. The number of high school graduates has doubled since as recent a year as 1940. This in itself means opportunity to the business community, for it's a matter of straight statistics that the higher the education, the higher the demand for more goods, better food, more leisure, more travel, more education. A people with high standards of education is a people with high standards of living. Opportunity, leisure time. The average American today works 15% fewer hours than he did a generation ago. Yet his productivity is more than half again as high. Both trends, rising productivity and shorter hours, will continue. The increase in leisure time, now and in the years ahead, is a creative economic force bringing new needs, hence new opportunities for marketing. These are only a sampling of the great opportunities in store. Opportunities that could and should and will be seized by American businessmen to create more goods, more jobs, more income, and more opportunities for us all. As we peer into the future, the signposts become visible, even legible. We know we are somewhere in the middle of a period of unprecedented economic change. As one industry spokesman recently wrote, "For those of us who view history as a fascinating spectacle, the prospect of the coming quarter century is exhilarating. It is as if we were privileged not only to see, but to participate in centuries of development, telescoped into a brief span." It is not too early to train your sights on this prospect right now.
great gasolines, Standard Red Crown and Standard White Crown. The fuels that power this modern age. On the highways, on the farm, and their kindred aviation fuels in the air. Here is the inside story of these modern gasolines.
Hello, folks. I'm a carbon atom, and since I'm an essential part of each of the hydrocarbons in crude oil, I'm here to give you the inside dope on gasoline. I'm the smallest possible particle of carbon. Why, I'm so small, 1,000 billion atoms like me could dance on the head of a pin. Scientists know I act as though I had 4 arms, and these fellows, who are the hydrogen members of this combination, have only 1 arm. We're going to form a molecule. Watch. I grab hold of hydrogens like this, then another carbon. In doing this, we make a kind of chain. See? When we're together, the combination is a hydrocarbon molecule, one of the many, many different hydrocarbons. For instance, we have formed a typical gasoline molecule. Now I want you to meet some of my relatives who form in the same way but have different patterns.
I'm another hydrocarbon, a gas molecule.
My size makes me a typical kerosene molecule.
I'm one of the fuel oil molecules.
A light lubricating oil molecule. That's me.
I'm a heavy lubricating oil molecule.
All of these carbons and hydrogens make me a residual materials molecule.
So you see, there are lots of different molecules, different sizes, different shapes, all found in crude oil. Still the best raw material for the great motor fuels of today. From it, science builds gasoline, selecting the groups of molecules wanted and changing their sizes and shapes as required. To do this job, calls for great storage tanks to maintain a constant supply of crude oil. Batteries of pumps. A maze of valves and pipes. Mighty facilities. And an army of experienced, specially trained workers. The first step is to separate the crude oil into the parts that you saw a moment ago. This is done by distillation. You know that when you boil water, the vapors can be condensed. The same principle is used in distilling crude oil. Giant units with bubble towers condense vapors just as the cold tumbler did. Here in a single tower, much simplified, crude oil is separated into the different fractions needed for gasoline, kerosene, fuel oil, and other petroleum products. Here we see the crude oil being heated. Most of it is vaporized. At the bottom of the bubble tower, unvaporized large molecules of heavy lube oil and residual materials are drawn off. At the second level, the light lube oil is condensed out of the vapor and withdrawn. At the third level, the largest of the lighter remaining molecules condensed to form the fuel oil cut. At the fourth level, kerosene is condensed and drawn off. At the fifth level, the gasoline molecules become liquid, leaving the very light gas molecules to go out the top of the bubble tower. In the average crude oil, only a limited amount of gasoline is present. So let's see what we might get from this simple distillation. A barrel of crude oil produces 20% residual fuel oil and asphalt, 7% lube oil and wax, 39% gas oil and fuel oil, 15% kerosene, 1% gas, and gasoline only 18%. Not nearly enough for today's millions of cars. But scientists of the Standard Oil Company, Indiana, invented the cracking process, enabling refiners to make more than twice as much gasoline from each barrel of crude. Today, were it not for the demands for fuel oil and diesel fuel, almost the whole barrel could be converted into gasoline. By making more gasoline, cracking has conserved our natural resources and at the same time made gasolines of higher anti-knock quality for greater performance and economy. Here's a typical gas oil molecule to be cracked. You are already familiar with the way it's constructed. To crack it, heat is applied under precisely controlled conditions, more heat than is needed for distillation. And now, folks, you are watching science change a molecule into more useful ones. On the left are two gasoline molecules. On the right are gas and carbon, all obtained from cracking one gas oil molecule. Thus, science creates gasoline where none existed before, high anti-knock gasoline. Here are some of the great units that do the cracking. And here's one that cracks tens of thousands of barrels of gas oil each day. Standard's continuing leadership was also strengthened by other processes. One is called polymerization. It simply takes molecules that are too small for gasoline, such as these gas molecules, unites them by the polymerization process to form a larger molecule, a gasoline molecule of exceptionally high anti-knock value. Thus, science again fashions for us more and better products. By a somewhat different process, this alkylation unit joins together two different molecules to make another high-octane gasoline component. And this unit, a hydroformer, changes the shape of molecules and takes out some of their hydrogen to make still more high anti-knock material. Finally, a process where cracking is affected by a catalyst, a reaction promoter that itself remains unchanged. The most modern method uses catalysts in a fine powder that will flow like a fluid. Here's what happens inside a fluid catalytic cracker. Gas oil is heated. It is joined by the hot, finely powdered catalyst shown here as little white grains. The hot oil and the still hotter catalyst then move together through pipes up into a chamber called the reactor and are tumbled about. Here the heavy oil molecules are cracked by catalytic action to produce gasoline molecules shown in red. These move out at the top. As the catalyst becomes covered with coke, it becomes less active and is drawn off at the bottom. Air blows it through a pipe to the regenerator, where the coke is burned off. This reheats the catalyst, which again joins the flow of incoming oil. Here's the entire operation showing the complete cycle. Notice that the same catalyst is used over and over again in this, the most modern method of gasoline manufacture. It takes a complicated unit to do the job. Every 2 minutes, a whole carload of catalyst passes through the lines. 16 stories high, each of the company's big cat crackers can produce enough gasoline in one day to last the average motorist 1,000 years. Contrast the modern unit you have just seen with this historic Burton cracking still at Whiting, Indiana, the first successful commercial cracking unit. Though the amount of oil in today's catalytic cracking units is actually less than in the old Burton units, the catalyst cracks the gas oil more than 7,000 times faster, and so permits much greater throughput. It is one more demonstration of leadership through science. To build top gasoline performance today, there are two major requirements: proper volatility and proper anti-knock quality. Let's take the first one, volatility, the tendency to change from liquid to vapor. The driver may not know a cat cracker from a firecracker, but he knows when his engine starts. And he wants it to warm up without coughing and sputtering. But starting and warm-up are not the whole story. In all seasons, the motorist wants quick acceleration. He wants economy, too. Mileage, and that calls for a scientific balance of gasoline components. You know how easy it is to ignite gas, which is made up of small molecules. Here's a mixture of liquid hydrocarbons so light and volatile that the heat of a hand will make it boil. It's inflammable and so volatile it ignites plenty fast. Now here are some of the heavier, less volatile hydrocarbons. The lighted taper does not ignite them, yet when vaporized and burned in an engine, they pack a lot of power and give mileage. To make a gasoline blend that will have a proper combination of volatility characteristics, first we put in the very light hydrocarbons for quick starting. The next heavier ones have rapid warm-up. Then some that give instant acceleration, and the final portion for full power and good mileage. The blended gasoline has the desired range of performance with economy because it contains just the right groups of hydrocarbon molecules. One, for instance, starting, but so active that in the summer he should be used only in moderation. One for rapid warm-up. One for smooth acceleration. And one for full power and good mileage. Molecules that work together, a harmonious team. In the engine laboratory, by means of a glass intake manifold, you can actually see one of the volatility differences between fuels. Slowing down the action, here's what too low volatility causes: a wet manifold and imperfect distribution. These liquid droplets decrease engine performance, waste mileage, and dilute the crankcase oil. Switching to a fuel with proper volatility, vaporization is complete and there's no waste. To assure trouble-free performance at all times, fuels are tested out on the road as well as in the laboratory, in all types of engines and under all of the different seasonal and climatic conditions of use. Under city driving, and trip conditions in hot weather and cold. Seasonal variations and the climates of different regions must be taken into account. That is why the Standard Oil Company, Indiana, adjusts volatility to suit the season and the region in which its gasolines will be used. A distillation test measures the volatility of motor gasoline. The results here plotted form a typical distillation curve for a gasoline of proper volatility. Now for the next major requirement, the prevention of fuel knock.
The motorist wants smooth, controlled application of power. Using a special demonstrator, I shall show the difference between poor performance and good performance. Now, with the hard face of this mallet, I strike the piston. The piston, you see, receives a punishing rap, showing how power is wasted when gasoline knocks. This time, I shall use the cushion face of the mallet to show what happens when gasoline does not knock. Smooth, useful power propels the piston, sends the crank spinning. The performance difference you've seen is a mighty important one that you ought to understand better. So let's look inside the engine by means of animation and see what happens when the fuel burns. These gasoline molecules have not been improved on or controlled by science. They are untamed and unruly. What you will see next actually takes place in about 1/500th of a second. First, the spark ignites the compressed fuel charge. Now, watch for the knock. In this greatly slowed down action, you could see that with this gasoline, combustion was uneven and uncontrolled, and at the end there was a jarring, violent explosion, a knock that pounded and shook the engine. Now we shall repeat the action. Watch again for the knock. Now, with gasoline made up of molecules that have been science-fashioned so that they have the required anti-knock quality, molecules that stay under control and work as a team, let's see what happens. Note in this case that the combustion is more uniform and there is no knock. The big difference, as you could see, is that with gasoline of the required anti-knock quality, there is no knock. Combustion is smooth and even and completely under control. Now we shall repeat the action. Watch how the combustion proceeds as it should, smoothly and without the interference caused by knocking. In the modern high compression engine, modern gasoline gives the greater performance required today. The car accelerates more rapidly, climbs hills faster, travels more miles per gallon. In addition to fashioning the molecules to prevent fuel knock, refineries usually add minute quantities of tetraethyl lead to help accomplish the same purpose. This model shows how just the right amount of fluid containing tetraethyl lead and dye is added to the gasoline. In the knock testing laboratories, test engines are used to make sure that the proper anti-knock quality has been built into Standard Oil's gasolines. The high anti-knock reference fuel is called isooctane, hence the expression octane number. This test engine is equipped with a dial indicator that shows just how badly the engine is knocking. With a fuel of low octane number, here's how it sounds. Switching to a high octane number fuel, the knocking diminishes and finally fades out completely. This illustrates the smooth, even performance you get from standard red crown and standard white crown.
The engineer has had his say, but modern processes and skillful know-how are not enough. There must also be safeguards. You can depend on it that Standard Oil Company, Indiana, constantly checks and inspects its fuels by every needed control test. For example, the vapor pressure test that controls vapor lock tendencies. A test to make sure there is no harmful gum. Another to make sure that today's fine gasolines will not deteriorate in storage. A test that guards against corrosive impurities. Testing, testing, testing. Another of the 1,500 and more daily control tests. In addition, these great laboratories are entirely devoted to extensive research. carried on by hundreds of capable scientists, working on more and still better products for the future. Cooperative work with the automobile industry guarantees that the right gasoline will always be available for any car that's developed. Put all of this together, and you have what it takes to deliver today's and tomorrow's great motor fuels. Huge units like this super fractionator and the other multi-million-dollar units that go to make up the great modern refineries of the Standard Oil Company, Indiana. With the tradition of pioneers behind us and better facilities ahead of us, future progress leading to still finer products is assured. So there's the story, folks, and I'm proud to be a part of it, even if only as a tiny atom inside modern gasoline. This is what's behind the gasoline you sell, whether from tank truck or on the service station driveway. Behind these symbols of service is a great record of scientific achievement that certifies today's leadership and guarantees tomorrow's.
In 1943, it was one of our strategic aims to draw as many German forces as possible away from the Russian front and French coastal areas and to contain them on the Italian peninsula while liberating as much of Italy as might be possible with the means at our disposal. As the bulk of our supplies was directed to England for the forthcoming invasion, operations in Italy had to be conducted on an extremely limited scale. Thus it came about that during the winter months, the number of Allied divisions in Italy was greatly reduced. Yet so determined was their effort that they succeeded in holding in Italy a very large number of German divisions during the pre-invasion period. San Pietro in the 5th Army sector was the key to the Liri Valley. We knew it, and the enemy knew it. We had to take it even though the immediate cost would be high. We took it, and the cost in relation to the later advance was not excessive. By its very nature, this success worked bitter hardships upon each individual soldier, calling for the full measure of his courage and devotion. The response of our 5th Army troops provides an inspiring page in our military history. To these individuals, living and dead, and to those who now continue in their tradition, this picture is dedicated.
Liri Valley lies in the Italian Midland, some 60 miles northwest of Naples to some 40 miles southeast of Rome. A wide, flat corridor enclosed between 4 walls of mountains. In winter, the highest peaks of the Liri Range ascend into the snows, but the valley floor with its olive groves and ancient vines, its crops of wheat and corn, is green the year around. That is, in normal times. Last year was a bad year for grapes and olives, and the fall planting was late. Many fields lay fallow, There are two ways from the south into the valley. One, a narrow pass. The other, a high, scenic road over the mountains. They converge before the site of the ancient village of San Pietro, which for 700 years has stood at the threshold of Leary Valley, welcoming the traveler. The stones of its walls were quarried out of the parent hill from whose slopes it rises. Population 1,412 at the last census. A farming community. Patron saint, Peter. Point of interest, St. Peter's, 1438. Note, interesting treatment of chancel. From the end of October 1943 until the middle of December, San Pietro and the surrounding ground was the scene of some of the bitterest fighting on our Fifth Army front. The Italian campaign had entered its second phase, to push forward again after a static period brought on by heavy seasonal rains. Our battle lines were haphazard as the terrain itself, with its flood-swollen rivers that twisted back and forth across our line of march so that each river seemed like five. And where there was no river to cross, a mountain blocked our going, each peak ahead being a few meters higher than the last we had won, so that each new peak had to be fought for, the hard, uphill way, with the enemy looking down our throats. They had had time to fortify and camouflage their positions. No amount of artillery fire or aerial bombardment could force them to withdraw. That was for the infantry to do, employing those weapons that confine and destroy life in narrow trenches, caves, and fighting holes. It was up to the man with the rifle, the man under fire from all weapons, the man whose way all our weapons, land, air, and sea, serve only